The biggest news today is that it's Election Day. Have you voted yet? If you're watching on the Granite Transformation studio camera, I have my I voted sticker on my coat because it went out there early this morning. Things were starting to pick up by the time I got to the polling place by around 8:30. You know, I don't know what the expectation was for turnout today, but there are some big issues pending in St. Louis County. I will say this. I did notice there today outside of the polling place, there was one of those petitioners standing out there trying to gather signatures for the legalization of medical marijuana. Sir, would you like to sign this? I just laughed at her. Yeah, right. So anyway, saw that today. That was about the most interesting thing I saw at the polls. But I did ask the Republican election director for St. Louis County, Rick Stream, to join us at this hour. Rick, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing fine, Mark. Thanks for having me on today.
Well, I'm glad we got the opportunity. I know things must be busy for you today. What are you expecting turnout-wise in St. Louis County?
Well, it's difficult to predict, but if it's a normal April turnout, which is school board races, municipal elections, propositions, things like that, we're probably going to get 20 to 25% county-wide turnout. Now, some areas will have a little bit higher, maybe up to 30 to 35%. For instance, like in the Kirkwood area, where there's a city proposition and a school board race with 8 candidates plus a school board proposition on the ballot too. So we may have a higher turnout there, but generally I think we're going to see 20 to 25%.
Yeah, that's better than I expected, to be quite honest. I mean, I know you don't expect general election size crowds in April. That's for sure. I know when I went out in November to vote, I got there. I thought I'd be smart and get there 15 minutes before the doors open, and the line was already wrapped around the building. So.
Yeah, we have 75 to 80% turnout, even a little higher than 80% in some precincts for presidential races, and that's clearly we're going to get about 1/3 or a little bit less of that this April.
Yeah, well, that's good.
We still have to run the elections the same way. We still have the same number of polling places, 430 plus polling places, 4,000 poll workers. So we still have to do all of the same things, and we just have a lower turnout. But I have to say, April elections, complexity-wise, are more difficult because of all the different municipalities, school districts, fire districts, library districts, all of those different areas. We have 324 different ballot styles in April, and we only have about 100 in November. So
okay.
It's more complex.
You and I talked about this at the Reagan-Lincoln Day dinner, and some changes that have been made to at least the St. Louis County Board of Elections in terms of trying to clean up the voter rolls a little bit. Why don't you talk to my listeners about how you're doing that?
Sure. Well, under the state laws, we normally work very hard to take care of voter registrations. We double-check to make sure that they are citizens and we get federal help in that regard, some of their websites. We also make sure that anybody who's died, we get the death notices, and if there's a felon, we get those notices from different people, different organizations, state and federal organizations there. So we've always been doing those things. With our new system where this election, for the first time, we sent out a notice of election card to each individual voter, and they're delivered to each individual voter, not to a household. So if the post office is required to return those notice of election cards back to us if the voter does not live there anymore. So at that point, when we get a card back, then we begin the process of removing them from our rolls, or determining, first of all, if they've moved or whatever's happened to them. So it's a great way for a first step for us to begin to take people off the rolls who don't live in St. Louis County anymore. We also have cooperative agreements with 27 other states to double-check if people have moved out of the state or in from another state. So we're doing more and more in that regard to try to clean up the voter rolls.
Yeah, it's just a shame that that's not standard across the state, but it varies from county to county, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Every county, there's 114 counties plus the city of St. Louis, 115 different election authorities in the state of Missouri. They all do it a little differently, and A lot of similarities, but still, everyone's a unique and separate entity.
We're talking to Rick Stream from the St. Louis County Board of Elections. When I went in to vote this morning, I had Jay Ashcroft on the show last week. We talked about voter ID and what they're doing to get people ready for that as they roll it out. I noticed a sign as soon as you walk in saying you need to show one of these forms of ID to vote. And then at the bottom, it tells you if you don't have any of them, you can talk to at least 2 election judges and you can vote anyway. So we're already asking for ID. I mean, I think that's a good start.
That's correct. And the photo ID amendment, constitutional amendment that passed last year, goes into effect June the 1st. So that's when people are going to be required to show a photo ID. And most of us, we're showing our driver's licenses anyway.
Right.
But if somebody, for instance, and Secretary Ashcroft has been all over the state, including the St. Louis County and St. Louis City, to explain this program. And if people can't afford or don't have the wherewithal to get the photo ID, but and they are a citizen, they are registered to vote, then the state will help pay for that. So there's no excuse, but that doesn't go into effect until June the 1st. So that'll be our next election, which we'll have a small one here in St. Louis County in August, and then a small one in November. But the big ones will be next year, the 3 big ones, April, August, and the general election, congressional election in November.
Very good. So we'll be looking for these election results tonight. I know Prop P, that's the only countywide proposition, right?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Prop P, the police one, and public safety. And that's generated some interest also. So that will be coming in. We don't know when the results will come in. It all depends on when the election workers finish up after 7 o'clock. Everybody can vote until 7 p.m. tonight, so I'd encourage everybody to get out to vote. But after that, then things are closed up, and we start getting the machines back. But it won't be before 8 o'clock before we start to get some meaningful results. We'll be able to release the absentee balloting probably around between 7:30 and 8 o'clock, and then it probably won't be before 8:30 to 9 o'clock before we start getting the actual Election Day results in.
Rick, let me ask you this. As somebody who's been involved, obviously, at the elected level and now serving with the Board of Elections, there's a movement afoot in Missouri that I'm sure you've heard of trying to ban electronic voting machines in the state to require everybody to go to a paper ballot. Where do you stand on that issue?
Well, it's an interesting issue. I know we've actually, Eric Fay, the Democrat Director of Elections here in St. Louis County, and I have gone up to testify for informational purposes only on the paper ballot. It's basically paper ballots versus electronic machines. And it would be a very serious hardship for St. Louis County to do it that way. But I think a lot of people are concerned about the machines being hacked into or whatever. And we have double-checked, triple-checked. In St. Louis County, we do not outsource our machines or machine maintenance to anybody. We have a crew here on staff that does all the repairs, so they never leave our facility. They're locked up at all times, and we have actually done tests to see if somebody could do something with the electronic machines. We have a paper roll inside and 2 electronic counters. And for instance, in the race that I ran 2.5 years ago for county exec, when we did the recount, the machines agreed right down to the last vote. In other words, every machine, the paper roll total equated to the 2 electronic devices inside the machine. For every single machine, the 1,800 machines that were in St. Louis County then, it agreed right down to the last vote. The paper ballots are where things changed. So what we're trying to do is our machines are about 11 years old now, and we're trying to get, if we can get the money, which it's going to be about $10 million, so I don't see it happening right away. But there's technology out there that allows people to vote on a touch screen that will print out a ballot then that they will hold in their hands that will replicate what they voted on the screen, and then they'll take that paper ballot and put it into a paper ballot counter.
Okay.
That is the best of both, and I think it would satisfy the concerns of everybody.
So you're comfortable with them, at least in St. Louis County, because of the way you guys deal with them. That's good.
Yes, that's true. I can't speak for any other county, any other state. I just know that we really keep control over what is in our machines, and nobody else can get to them, period.
Rick Stream, I appreciate your time. Hope you have a smooth election day.
Well, thanks, Mark. We're praying for that. And I'll let you know. We worked 12 hours yesterday from 8 to 8, and we got in here at 4 a.m. this morning. We'll be here till probably midnight. So it's a long 2 days.
Sounds good. We'll talk soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right. Appreciate that. Rick Stream, a Republican election director in St. Louis County. Interesting. A lot of people have strong feelings on whether or not we should avoid these electronic machines. So that debate continues, but there is an effort underway, I'll just tell you now, around the state to try to just make it Missouri law where you couldn't use the electronic machines. So just so you know that's going on.